ask the Honorable Premier to say prayers.
Let us pray. Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, we beseech thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Legislative Assembly now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of thy name and for the safety, honor, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Charles, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially we pray for the Governor of our islands, the Premier, the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, the Leader of the Opposition, Ministers of the Cabinet, ex officio members, and members of the Legislative Assembly, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask for thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace, now and always.
Please be seated. Proceedings are resumed.
Oaths or affirmations. Oath of allegiance, due execution by Ms. Gloria McFeel-Nixon, the acting Honourable Deputy Governor responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service, to be the temporary ex officio member of the Legislative Assembly.
I, Mrs. Gloria Michelle McFeel-Nixon, do swear that I will well and truly serve Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, and the people of the Cayman Islands in the office of ex officio member of the Legislative Assembly, so help me God. I, Mrs. Gloria Michelle McFeel-Nixon, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, according to law, so help me God.
McFeel-Nixon, we welcome you to the House. You are no stranger to us. We are always very pleased when you are here.
Reading by the Speaker of messages and announcements.
Honourable members, since we last met, the father of the member from Northside passed away. Captain Nate, as we all respectfully called him, was a master mariner, a seaman who served his country in that capacity. and we do not need to reiterate the valuable role the Caymanian seamen has played, as this Honourable Assembly quite know of it and appreciate and respect that role. Captain Nade also worked as the Deputy Port Director for some years. He also was appreciative of his community, and the Northside Kitchen Band played an invaluable service to its community of Northside and, of course, to our cultural heritage. We thank him for his community spirit and his love and performance of music, and regrets his passing. We offer here, as we did by other means, our sincerest condolences to Captain Nade's widow and his family, the member from Northside being his eldest child. I would appreciate it if members would rise in respect thereto. Please be seated.
Permit me, Mr. Speaker, to thank you and the other members, and will so convey to the rest of the family.
Presentation of petitions.
None.
Presentation of papers and of reports. Government minute. The government's response to the report of the Standing Public Accounts Committee and the report of the Office of the Auditor General and the financial reporting of the Cayman Islands Government, General Report 2015-2016 financial audits, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Premier.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Section 77, or I should say Standing Order 77-7 of the Legislative Assembly Standing Orders states that the government minute shall be laid on the table of the House within 3 months of laying of the report of the Standing Public Accounts Committee and of the report of the Auditor General to which it relates. This government minute constitutes the government's response to the report of the Standing Public Accounts Committee on the report of the Auditor General on financial reporting of the Cayman Islands Government General Report 2015 and 2016 financial audits, December 2017. Mr. Speaker, the committee noted the numerous issues that contributed to the disclaimed opinion and thought that several of these matters required a policy decision which needed to take place in another forum. The committee endorsed all the recommendations of the Auditor General contained in the report entitled Financial Reporting of the Cayman Islands Government General Report 2015 and 2016, and additionally recommended that A, a national debate be held, started first in the Legislative Assembly, about retirement, including the age of retirement, post-retirement health care, pension, and other benefits for Caymanians, and especially civil servants, to address the issue of the ongoing liability for post-retirement benefits and pension obligations for civil servants, and the underfunded position on the public sector pension funds, and whether a national health insurance scheme should be considered, and or changes made to the way Cineco charges its premiums to different groups to better spread the risks and costs. B, the government consider legislative changes that separate the pension fund assets out from the General Public Service Pension Board accounts, and that legislation puts these assets beyond the direct control or influence of government, to remove the qualification point on the non-consolidation of the Public Service Pension Board. For those statutory authorities and government companies incurring losses, that the government reconsiders its policy position on the nature of their business, noting that in many cases the level of losses incurred were growing faster than the increase in revenues, and so the financial outlook continued to be bleak. Mr. Speaker, the government's response to those observations of the committee is as follows. The government notes the recommendations of the PAC and would like to report that it is currently considering a number of potential options that are geared towards limiting the post-retirement health care liability. The government continues to contribute to the past service pension liability at the rates recommended by the triannual actuarial valuations. For example, the 2019 budget appropriates $11.14 million towards the liability, and the government intends to seek the Legislative Assembly's approval for supplementary funding to pay a further $4 million into the pension funds in order to be nearer to the contribution rate as recommended in the 1st January 2017 actuarial pension report. The Ministry of Finance has held discussions with the Office of the Auditor General regarding the legislative changes that are required to separate the pension fund assets from the General Public Service Pension Board accounts. The Office of the Auditor General reported that despite a change in legislation, the government will still have direct control based on the fact that government will indefinitely retain the authority to change the legislation. The government, therefore, has to conduct further research on the appropriate options in order to resolve this issue. The government is not entirely clear what the committee intended when it recommends that government, quote, reconsiders its policy position on the nature of their, that being the SAGC's business, unquote. The government assumes that the committee is referring in its recommendation to the scope of SAGC's operations. At present and for the foreseeable future, the government does not plan to undertake a wholesale review of the scope of all SAGC's operations, but will do so on an individual SAGC basis. For example, the government recognizes that efficiencies may be gained from improving the operations of Cineco, and as such, by 31st of May 2019, the government will commence the procurement of consultancy services to review the operations of Cineco, including the option of expanding its products and services, and Cineco being the first line of insurance for residents of the islands. Mr. Speaker, with respect to comments and recommendations of the PAC on the judicial administration, their comments and recommendations are as follows. The government reconsider the reintroduction of the preliminary inquiry process as a potential to improve efficiency in judicial administration. 2, it was noted that the entity now believes it had a fully complete fixed asset register, which they believe will mean that the opening and closing fixed asset balances will be capable of being relied upon by the auditors during the 2016-2017 audit, which should result in a clean opinion. The PSC recommends that the government reconsider the reintroduction of the preliminary inquiry process as a potential measure to improve efficiency and as a cost-saving measure. Mr. Speaker, the government's response. The Judicial Administration's updated fixed asset register resulted in an unmodified opinion for the 2016-2017 financial statements, as the auditors were able to rely upon the opening and closing balances. Judicial administration, however, recognizes that the entity should strive to implement current best practice standards and therefore continues its efforts to enhance the quality of the register. Efficiencies in the preliminary inquiry process have been in place for a number of years. At the time of this inquiry, the changes were reflected in the Criminal Procedure Code 2017 revision, particularly in sections 84, 85, and 88 of the law. Section 84 of the law allows the summary court to commit a person for trial or transmit a matter for hearing. The effect of these changes is that long-form preliminaries no longer exist, whereby witnesses are called to give live evidence. There is now a two-step process. In summary, Section 85A of the law eliminates the need for a preliminary inquiry in respect of Class A, which are the very serious offenses only dealt with in the Grand Court offenses. In such circumstances, the summary court does not deal with the matter. It is immediately transmitted by the magistrate to the Grand Court. The section also allows for Class B offenses. These are lesser offenses that may be tried in either the summary or Grand Courts, related to the Class A offense to also be escalated to the Grand Court, the effect of which eliminates cases pending in both the summary and Grand Court, but rather for the matters to be dealt with before one court, namely the Grand Court. In the Grand Court, when the case is transmitted, the defendant has the right to make an application for dismissal. In summary, Mr. Speaker, Section 88 of the law, which deals with committal of Class B offenses, the preliminary inquiry is conducted on papers. In considering the statements, Section 88(3) specifically prohibits the magistrate from calling witnesses or taking oral evidence or statements from the accused. All considerations are conducted on the papers. This amendment to the law has also brought significant efficiencies to the process. It is also noted that the Practice Direction 5 of 2015, which addresses criminal case management, also directs that the defense shall notify the prosecution if the preliminary inquiry is to be contested at least 7 days before it is due to be heard. Mr. Speaker, comments and recommendations of the PSC on the Cayman National Cultural Foundation. The PSC supports the Office of the Auditor General's recommendation that CNCF should think about whether they need to employ a qualified bookkeeper like the other two entities have done. Cayman Islands National Museum, Cayman Islands Cultural Foundation, and NGCI were all qualified for the same reason. The PSC supports the recommendations of the Office of the Auditor General and is happy to report that all three entities are on the right track to implement the Office of the Auditor General's recommendation. The government's response, Mr. Speaker, the recommendation that CNCF hires a qualified bookkeeper will undoubtedly relieve the managing director of a time-consuming responsibility. For the record, CNCF received unqualified audits for each of the years between 2011 and 2015. Qualified opinions in 2016 and 2017 were as a result of a contingent liability unrelated to the fairness and completeness of the financial statements. Mr. Speaker, comments and recommendations of the PSC on the Maritime Authority of the Cayman Islands, which also received a qualified opinion. It was noted that the entity was taking steps to remove their qualification on the post-retirement medical liability by having a valuation done to make a provision for the liability in its 2016-2017 financial statements. The PSC is concerned that under the Global Director of Operations, who is responsible for the accounts, that there is no professionally qualified accountant to prepare and or sign off on the financial statements and recommends that this be rectified urgently. The PSC recommends that more emphasis be placed on controlling expenditure, as while during the last 5 years there is evidence of revenue growth, there appears to be an equal growth in expenditure. The PSC is concerned with information provided during the questioning of the Global Director of Operations of the October 2017 changes to the organization structure, which created the Global Director with higher salaries than previously existed. The PSC recommends that the ministry responsible ensure that the board of the Monetary Authority and the CEO clearly understand the provisions of the Public Authorities Law. Mr. Speaker, the government's response. The Maritime Authority has had the IAS 19 report on post-retirement health care completed by Mercer through the Public Service Pension Board. Subsequently, the liability has been recognized on Macy's financials, and the previous 3 years, 2014, 2015, 2015 to 2016, and 2016 to 2017, restated to reflect this recognition. Macy has implemented completing the IAS 19 report on an annual basis to accurately reflect this figure on annual financial statements. The Global Director of Operations, Mr. Osbert Francis, has a bachelor's in business administration, accounting degree, and he prepares Macy's monthly management reports for the Board of Directors, which is currently chaired by Mr. Philip Barnes, a CPA. The monthly management reports are reviewed by Mr. Kenrick Ebanks, the Global Director for Commercial Services, a trained accountant, prior to submission to the board. Macy's annual financial statements completed by Mr. Francis are submitted to Macy's Audit and Finance Committee for review and approval prior to submission to the board and subsequently the auditors. Mr. Barnes, chairman of the board, attends these meetings. The annual financials are audited by the Office of the Auditor General, and for the period ended December 31st, 2017, Macy received an unmodified opinion on its annual financial statements audit from the Office of the Auditor General. Macy continues to deliver services on behalf of the Cayman Islands government through its purchase agreement by subsidizing the difference between the going market rate for these services and the rate provided by the Cayman Islands government in said agreement. Despite this, Macy's revenues continue to grow as they explore new markets and expand their reach, particularly in the commercial sector of vessel registration. Macy has adjusted pricing structures to be competitive in this sector while expanding to break into new geographical markets. For the period ending December 31st, 2018, Macy recognized an increase in revenue over December 31st, 2017 of $496,078 Cayman Islands dollars and a reduction in expenses of $643,989 Cayman Islands dollars. Macy underwent an internal audit review of senior level positions for quarters 1 through 3 of 2018. The purpose of the review was to provide an independent assessment as to whether the appointment process for senior level positions, including the global director positions, were in compliance with the Public Authorities Law. Macy was found to be in compliance with the law by the Internal Audit Service, Office of the Deputy Governor. Mr. Speaker, I took the time to read the entire minute because there were some serious issues raised and some allegations made during the Public Accounts Committee, which it was important that the record corrected. And so, Mr. Speaker, with that, and your permission, I wish to lay this government minute on the table of this Honorable House.
So ordered.
Standing Business Committee report on the 5th meeting of the 2018-19 session of the Legislative Assembly. Standing Business Committee report on the 4th meeting of the 2018-19 session of the Legislative Assembly, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Premier.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the Legislative Assembly of the Cayman Islands report on of the Standing Business Committee for the fourth meeting of the 2018-2019 session of the Legislative Assembly. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to lay on the table of this Honourable House the Legislative Assembly of the Cayman Islands report of the Standing Business Committee for the fifth meeting of the 2018-2019 session of the Legislative Assembly.
So ordered.
Financial statements. Financial statements for the Ministry of Community Affairs, 31st of December 2018. The 2018 annual report for the Ministry of Community Affairs, Cayman Islands Government, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Premier, Minister of Employment, Border Control, Community Affairs, International Trade, Investment, Aviation and Maritime Affairs.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the 2018 annual report for the Ministry of Community Affairs and the 2018 annual report sorry, Mr. Speaker, and the financial statements, the annual report of the Ministry of Community Affairs, the 2018 annual report.
So ordered. Sorry, Premier, are you speaking there at all?
Mr. Speaker, simply to observe that the financial statements of the Ministry of Community Affairs for the 31st of December 2018 has received an unqualified opinion.
'18 Annual Report, Public Service Pension Board, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Deputy Governor, ex officio member responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service.
Honourable Acting Deputy Governor. I think I got that right, Mrs. Macfield-Nixon.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honorable House the annual report of the Public Service Pensions Board as at 31st December 2018. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I shall offer a brief explanation of the annual report for the Public Service Pensions Board as at 31st December 2018. In 2018, the Public Service Pensions Board continued to demonstrate its excellence in administration, oversight, and investment growth. With the ongoing support of the government as principal employer, and the participating statutory authorities and government-owned companies, the Public Service Pensions Board served our public and civil servants, and this includes providing ongoing income to over 1,800 retirees. Mr. Speaker, beyond steady and high-quality service, there are many highlights for the PSPB from 2018, including conducting roughly 24 informational presentations on plan operations and options, and having PSPB staff meet one-on-one with over 3,600 members to discuss their individual account. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to advise that the Public Service Pensions Fund continues to remain in good financial health. The fund holds a diversified portfolio of bonds and equity securities that, over the long term, provides above average return with minimized variability. The 2018 calendar year was a difficult one for markets, Mr. Speaker, with many stocks experiencing their worst close to a year since the Great Depression. However, in spite of this, the PSPB exceeded established benchmark investment expectations, and as a result, all members received a 4.97% annual return to their accounts, which was applied to balances as at 1st of January 2019. Other key financial information in respect of the PSPB for the year ended 31st December 2018 is as follows. The total contributions to the pension plans in 2018 was $56.3 million. Total benefits paid to participants is $39.1 million. Transfers of nearly $500,000 from other pension plans was received in 2018. Total investment income was a loss of $27.9 million. The operating and investment expense was $9.2 million. This brought the net assets available for benefits as at 31st December 2018 to $665.7 million. Auditor General's opinion. Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General issued an unqualified opinion on the financial position of the Public Service Pension Board as at 31st December 2018. The Auditor General has stated that the financial statement presents fairly in all material respects the financial position of the PSPB for the period. I would like to acknowledge the dedicated and talented team at the Public Service Pensions Board. They routinely demonstrate a commitment to their members and are always exploring ways to improve service and support offerings to all their members. Earlier this year, the PSPB continued to implement the Pension Uplift Program funded by the government by providing an uplift to $750 a month for over 300 Caymanian retirees who worked for 10 years or more and were earning less than this amount in their total pension earnings. Much like the previous year, this uplift was completed without requiring pensioners to fill out a single form to come into their office or to make any calls. Also, Mr. Speaker, as is normal practice, the PSPB recently assessed the annual impact of inflation and processed a cost of living adjustment of 3.3% for all defined benefit and defined contribution pensioners, again retroactive to January 2019. A few short weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, the PSPB actually opened a new office in Cayman Brac. The milestone of opening a new office not only shows the commitment to the sister islands, but it is also a clear example of the commitment by the PSPB team to focus on providing our seniors and pensioners reliable and easy-to-access service. Residents on Cayman Brac should have access to similar services available in Grand Cayman, and this new office achieves that. Looking ahead, the PSPB is continuing with other initiatives to best serve our islands. And in the coming years, I look forward to reporting on expanded customer service offerings and new online functions which will improve a PSB member's experience. My sincere appreciation and thanks go to the PSPB team for another strong and great long-term outlook. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Portfolio of Legal Affairs Annual Report 2016-2017 to be laid on the table by the Honourable Attorney General, ex officio member responsible for legal affairs.
The Honourable Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave of this House to lay on the table of the House the annual report, which of course includes the financial statements for the period ending December 31st, 2017. Mr. Speaker, the report is a report of the Portfolio of Legal Affairs, but of course it covers the activities of the AG's office, the Solicitor General's office, the legislative drafting, Law Revision Commission, the Law Reform Commission, the FRA, the Anti-Money Laundering Unit, and of course, the Truman Button Law School.
So ordered. Is the Honorable Attorney General speaking there too?
Mr. Speaker, no, the report itself is quite self-explanatory and makes very good reading, and I would commend it to honorable members of this House as well as the general public. Thank you.
Water Authority of the Cayman Islands Annual Report 2016-17 to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Education, Youth, Sports, Agriculture and Lands.
The Deputy Premier, are you laying on?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to read on behalf of the Honourable Minister the annual report for 2016-17 of the Water Authority of the Cayman Islands.
Are you laying the report first?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the report, and I also would like to say that in the report it's also the financial for 2017 is included.
So ordered.
Mr. Speaker, just to say that the financials are unqualified, and I invite all honourable members to have a read when they have a chance. Thank you.
Honorable, are you reading a message or no? No? Okay, understood. Thank you.
Financial statements of the Cayman Islands Health Services Authority, 31st of December 2017, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Health, Environment, Culture and Housing.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House financial statements of the Cayman Islands Health Services Authority, 31st of December 2017.
Ordered. Is the Minister speaking?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with Section 52(8) of the Public Management and Finance Law 2018 revision, I am pleased today to place before this Honourable House the audited financial statements of the Cayman Islands Health Services Authority for the 18-month period ended 31st of December 2017. Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands HSA is a statutory body that was established as an authority on the 1st of July 2002 under the Health Services Authority law. The authority provides care through the 124-bed Cayman Islands Hospital and 18-bed Faith Hospital in Cayman Brac. The authority provides primary and secondary levels of health care services for all three islands, and its facilities include the following healthcare agencies. The main facilities are Cayman Islands Hospital in Georgetown, Grand Cayman, and Faith Hospital in Cayman Brac. The community-based services facility include Little Cayman Healthcare Center, Georgetown General Practice Clinic, West Bay Health Center, Bordentown Health Center, East End Health Center, North Side Health Center, the Public Health Unit, the Lions Eye Clinic, Georgetown Dental Clinic, the Merrins Dental Clinic, and the Cayman Brac Dental Clinic. Mr. Speaker, in reviewing the audited financial statements for the 18-month period ended the 31st of December 2017, the authority recorded total revenue from the government program, patient service fee, and other sources of $160,490,420. The total operating expenses reported were $169,391,394. The reported net loss for the period was $8,900,974 compared to that to the 12-month period ended the 30th of June 2016, where the net loss was $10,648,406. The current assets as at 31st of December 2017 were reported of $53,666,549. Fixed assets were $71,934,917, and total assets were $125,601,466. Total liabilities of the authority were $160,349,480. Therefore, net assets liabilities for the authority were reported at $34,748,014 for the same period. Mr. Speaker, the Health Services Authority ended the fiscal period with a cash balance of $31.9 million compared to the 30th of June 2016 balance of only $3.9 million. Also, there was a $2.5 million in equity injection made by the government during the 18-month period, which included additional injection for the early repayment of a loan. Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General completed the audit and issued a qualified opinion on the financial statements of the Health Services Authority for the period of 31st of December 2017. A qualified opinion means that a portion of the financial statements cannot be relied upon, but the rest of the statements can be relied upon by the reader. In our report, the Auditor General pointed out three significant matters that influenced her to arrive at this opinion: ineffective controls over completeness of patients' revenue, patient services fees. The Auditor General stated that she was unable to satisfy herself that the reported amount for patient services of $138.7 million is fairly stated on a statement of comprehensive income. In addition, the authority could not represent to her that the controls for recording of patient services fees are effective to ensure that reported revenues are complete. Also, because of the lack of internal controls, sufficient audit procedures could not be performed. Completeness and valuation of patient-related accounts receivable. For this matter, Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General stated that she was unable to satisfy herself that the net amount of accounts received, $12.2 million as shown on the statement of the financial position, is fairly stated. She noted that as the amount reported for patient-related accounts receivable is directly related to her concerns relating the amount reported for revenues. She was also unable to perform sufficient audit procedures for this amount. The Auditor General went on to say that her review of subsequent receipts from patients to satisfy herself of the provision of bad debts at 31st of December 2017 was also impaired for the same reason. Accuracy of accumulated deficit. For this item, the Auditor General pointed out that due to the concern she had regarded the amount reported for patient-related accounts receivable, she was unable to satisfy herself that the amount of $208 million reported as the accumulated deficit in the net worth section of the Statement of Financial Position was accurately reported. Other matters: post-retirement health care costs, emphasis of matter. The Auditor General, in the emphasis of matter paragraph, outlined that she would like to draw attention to Note 23, which states that the recognition of post-retirement health liability resulted in a net deficit of $34.7 million and a new loss for the year of $8.9 million. This event raised a substantial doubt about the health service's ability to continue as going concern. The note also described a series of action plans taken by management to alleviate this concern. She then stated that her opinion was not modified in respect of this matter. Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General's opinion was that except for the possible effects of the three matters outlined above for the basis for qualified opinion, these financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the Health Services Authority as of 31st of December 2017 and the results of its financial performance and its cash flow for the year then ended in accordance with international financial reporting standards. Mr. Speaker, before I take my seat, I would like to recognize the authority on the achievement of several notable milestones during the 2016-2017 period. Some of these include launching of the authority's Patient and Family Advisory Committee, expanding clinical diagnostic capabilities for the testing of viral diseases, and commencement of the authority's quest-seeking Joint Commission International Accreditation. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would like to publicly thank the board and management of the Health Services Authority for their hard work and perseverance in producing this report for the audit to be completed by the Auditor General. I now commend these audited financial statements and the annual report to this Honorable House and invite members and the public to review this report in detail. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Annual Report 2016-2017, Health Services Authority, Cayman Islands. To be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Health, Environment, Culture and Housing.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House Annual Report 2016-2017, the Health Services Authority, Cayman Islands.
So ordered. Is the Minister speaking? Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The report is self-explanatory.
Cayman Islands Monetary Authority 2018 Annual Report to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Financial Services and Home Affairs.
The Honourable Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to lay on the table of this Honourable House the annual report and the related audited financial statements of the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority 2018 for the 12-month financial period beginning 1st January 2018 and ending 31st December 2018.
So ordered. Is the Minister speaking there at all?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just to highlight a few of the important achievements of CIMA during the past financial year. Mr. Speaker, I invite members of the Chamber to review the financial statements in with regard to the financial performance, the details which are contained therein, but to say generally that the Auditor General issued an unqualified opinion on the financial position of the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority as of 31st December 2018. Mr. Speaker, some of the highlights from the annual report deal with a number of areas, and starting with the regulatory update. During the reporting period, efforts continued to, or made by CIMA, continue to strengthen and enhance the regulatory framework governing the financial services industry in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, in collaboration with the Cayman Islands government and other public agencies, along with representatives of the private sector, the authority took several steps to implement measures and recommendations following the CFATF on-site review, which took place in December 2017. Mr. Speaker, the regulatory structure used by the authority was also revamped in 2018 to strengthen the Cayman Islands anti-money laundering and countering financing of terrorism AML-CFT framework to enhance the AML-CFT related supervisory practices for a more robust regulatory regime. And for example, revisions and amendments to the Cayman Islands AML framework included, but are not limited to, the Monetary Authority 2018 revision, the Monetary Authority Administrative Fines Amendment Regulations 2018, guidance notes on the prevention and detection of money laundering and terrorist financing in the Cayman Islands, November 2018, the Terrorism Law, March 2018, Proceeds of Crime Law, March 2018, amendment in December 2018, and the Anti-Money Laundering Regulations, March 2018. Mr. Speaker, CIMA also took several steps to enhance the AML framework to adopt a more risk-based supervisory approach, and the updated risk-based methodology was developed in response to the changing global environment, which has presented more complex risks that we currently face as a financial services regulator. The authority also enhanced prudential on-site inspections for all high-risk licensed entities while ensuring that the authority's regulatory measures were aligned with appropriate international standards required for effective and prudent oversight per CIMA's statutory obligations. Mr. Speaker, speaking to the overview of the industry performance, efforts continue to strengthen and enhance the regulatory framework governing the financial services industry, as I said, for the period. With respect to insurance, Cayman Islands remains the second largest domicile for captive insurance companies, and the jurisdiction continues to be the leading domicile for healthcare and group captives. As at 31st December 2018, there were 830 insurance licensees under supervision. This, Mr. Speaker, is up slightly from the same period in December 2017. The number of insurance companies stood at 730 at 31st December 2018, and the premiums generated equaled 15.4 billion. The assets totaled 68.7 billion. Mr. Speaker, during the reporting period of 1st January 2018 to 31st December 2018, 33 new insurance companies were added to the Cayman Islands international insurance market. Mr. Speaker, turning to funds, the Cayman Islands continues to be a jurisdiction of choice for the offshore hedge fund industry. The total number of regulated funds as at 31st December 2018 was 10,992, compared to 10,559 for the same period 2017, an increase of 4.1%, and the first increase noticed since 2013. Mr. Speaker, the number of funds as at 31st December 2018 includes 7,654 registered funds, 2,946 master funds, 317 administered funds, and 75 licensed funds. Mr. Speaker, trust and corporate and company management services, although the total licensed and registered trust companies moderated slightly, falling by 1.2%, the Cayman Islands still remains a leading jurisdiction from which trust and company management services are provided. There were 110 trust companies licensed as of 31st December 2018. With respect to the banks, Mr. Speaker, the global changes in laws and regulations has had an impact on the number of banks licensed in the Cayman Islands. The jurisdiction recorded a decrease by approximately 10.14% from 148 at December 2017 to 133 at December 2018. 6 retail category A and 122 category B banks. Mr. Speaker, domestic assets were US $17.7 billion and liabilities were recorded at $49.3 billion. As at 31st December 2018, the jurisdiction ranked 12th internationally in terms of cross-border assets of $652 billion and 12th internationally by cross-border liabilities of $622 billion booked by banks licensed in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to organizational developments, there's a few I would like to highlight with respect to CIMA's further development and organizational changes that took place during the 12-month period ending 31st December 2018. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, 26 new persons were hired to join the authority, bringing the total staff complement to 217. Recruitment was steady to be able to build the expertise needed for effective supervision. Of the 26 persons recruited, 19 were for regulatory divisions, 2 technical support in law, compliance, policy, and statistics, with 4 operational, human resources, finance, information systems, and an internal auditor appointed by the board of CIMA. Mr. Speaker, the authority also in 2018 completed the implementation and comprehensive enhancement of CIMA employee benefits package. The authority, as mandated by the board, worked with external consultants to conduct a comprehensive salary review to ensure that all CIMA staff are compensated according to market benchmarks for their expertise, performance, educational background, and qualifications. And as at 31st December 2018, all staff were brought onto the new salary scales. Mr. Speaker, CIMA continues to be active in the international front, sitting as members of numerous international organizations, both regionally and globally. And during 2018, a number of significant meetings were hosted by CIMA here in Cayman, and I encourage members to read the report to get the details thereof. So, Mr. Speaker, in summary, I attempted to provide an overview of some of the highlights in the annual report. As you know, CIMA plays a critical role in our financial services industry and has proven its commitment to playing its part in contributing to the continued success of the jurisdiction. And so I'd like to thank CIMA for all of the hard work and commitment that they have shown and continue to show during these times that we are facing with respect to the challenges both on the domestic and global front. Thank you.
Auditors Oversight Authority, Cayman Islands, annual report for the year ending the 31st of December 2018, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Financial Services and Home Affairs.
The Honourable Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to lay on the table of this Honourable House the annual report and audited financial statements of the Auditors Oversight Authority for the 12-month period beginning 1st of January 2018, ending on 31st December 2018.
So ordered. Is the Minister speaking?
Mr. Speaker, just to say that the auditor has issued an unqualified opinion and says that the financial statements presents fairly in all material respects and financial position of the audit authority as of 31st December 2018, and its financial performance and its cash flow for the year then ended in accordance with international public sector accounting standards, and the report details the other activities that I think is self-explanatory.
Cayman Islands Stock Exchange report for the fiscal year ended 31st of December 2018, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Financial Services and Home Affairs.
Honourable the Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to lay on the table of this Honourable House the annual report and audited financial statements of the Cayman Islands Stock Exchange for the 12-month period beginning 1st of January 2018 and ending 31st December 2018.
So ordered. Is the Minister speaking?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, just to briefly note that, again, the accounts were given an unqualified opinion, and I asked members to review the report in kind, but just to note, I guess for the record, that the stock exchange has once again given the government a dividend which was authorized by their council, totaling $820,000 for the 18-month period ending 31st December 2017. And also that the market capitalization of the stock exchange continues to grow on an annual basis, and the Cayman Islands Stock Exchange has a current listed market value of approximately US $310.2 billion. And I'd like to also thank the staff, recognize the current and previous boards and management and staff of the Cayman Islands Stock Exchange for a job well done.
The Tourism Attraction Board Annual Report 2016-2017. Tourism Attraction Board Financial Statements 30th of June 2016. To be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of District Administration, Tourism and Transport.
Honourable the Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the Tourism Attraction Board Annual Report 2016-2017, and I also beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the Tourism Attraction Board Financial Statements 30th of June 2016.
So ordered. Is the Minister speaking?
Mr. Speaker, just to mention, it's an unqualified audit, and invite members to have a read when they have a chance. Thank you.
Cayman Islands Airport Authority Financial Statements, year ending 30th of June 2016. Cayman Islands Airport Authority Annual Report, July 31st, 2015 to June 30th, 2016. To be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of District Administration, Tourism and Transport.
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the Cayman Islands Airport Authority Financial Statements, year ended 30th of June 2016. And I also beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the Cayman Islands Airports Authority Annual Report, July 1st, 2015 to June 30th, 2016. And Mr. Speaker, just to say that the financial statements are unqualified as well.
So ordered.
Port Authority of the Cayman Islands Annual Report for the 2016 financial year. Port Authority of the Cayman Islands Financial Report for the year ending 30th of June 2016. To be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of District Administration, Tourism and Transport.
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the Port Authority of the Cayman Islands Annual Report for 2016 financial year. I also beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the Port Authority of the Cayman Islands Financial Report for the year ended 30th of June 2016, and to say that the financials are unqualified.
So ordered.
Annual Report for Cayman Airways Limited for the 2016-2017 18-month period, and Cayman Airways Limited Consolidated Financial Statements 31st of December 2017. To be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of District Administration, Tourism and Transport.
The Honourable the Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the Annual Report for Cayman Airways Limited for 2016-17 18-month period, Cayman Airways Limited Consolidated Financial Statements 31st of December 2017, and to say that they're unqualified. Thank you.
So ordered.
Questions to Honourable Ministers and members of the Cabinet. The elected member for Georgetown Central to ask the Honourable Minister of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure. Question number 63.
The relevant standing order.
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order 23, 7, and 8 in order that questions may be taken after the hour of 11 o'clock.
Question is that standing orders be suspended in order to take business or questions after 11 a.m. Standing orders 7 and 8. All in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Have we called on the member from Georgetown Central?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper number 63. Can the Honourable Minister state whether the government is considering the implementation of the proposed National ID Plan?
The Honourable the Minister of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the answer. The government is considering the implementation of the National ID Plan, tentatively set to start in mid-2020. Though, Mr. Speaker, the exact timing and deployment have yet been finalized, as the budget for the period has not been before the Legislative Assembly. It is envisioned that the electors' cards issued prior to the next election will be formatted so that all necessary national ID information is contained and cards would not need to be reissued. To this end, the Supervisor of Elections is researching the necessary changes to the elections law in regards to the cards format to facilitate the information consolidation into one card. Mr. Speaker, I'm also proud to inform all members of this Honourable House that work has started on the Register of Natural Persons, which is a key prerequisite project to uniquely document all residents of our islands electronically. Mr. Speaker, this is scheduled to be completed by Q2 of next year. A consolidated list of natural persons within our islands, excluding visitors, will be derived from the General Registry System and the Immigration Work System. The list will be cross-referenced and identities linked with the electors' and driver's license records. This new electronic register will provide an ID number for each person so that in the future, each person can uniquely recognize in each government, uniquely recognized in each government system they are interacting with. Such clarity will remove confusion, such as shared names between father and son or mother and daughter in our systems, and is a key step towards e-conveyancing and a joined-up government. The register will also become the source of records for Caymanian immigration status going forward and would be linked to key reference information such as a person's right to reside within the islands.
The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer. If the Minister can further clarify the last sentence there that says, the register will also become a source of record for Caymanian immigration status going forward. And the reason I asked for clarification is because my first initial question was going to be whether these cards can clarify this issue that happens in the employment economy as to whether a Caymanian is a Caymanian or not, which we know we've been having problems with. So would this card be the solution to that problem rather than Caymanians having to go get a letter saying they're Caymanian?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, thank the member for the question. The reason for the last part, Mr. Speaker, is that the immigration system is not the authoritative source for persons who were born, married, or had a name change in the Cayman Islands. For these, the General Registry records are the authoritative source. As General Registry and Immigration have discrete systems reliant on manual data entry and do not share a unique identifier for persons other than names and dates of birth, it is possible for discrepancies to occur between the systems. As a result, the events recorded by General Registry are not automatically reflected in the immigration system. This currently prevents us from benefiting from the potential efficiencies and benefits to the residents that can be achieved via the system's interoperability. The e-government teams are working with the work team developers responsible for their new system so that when a new work permit application or residence is granted, a unique identifier for that person will be created for use in the Registry of Natural Persons. The point of the new registrar is not the duplication of data, but the ability to reliably link data accurately across multiple systems, therefore facilitating appropriate access to information internally and services for the person, such as the individual's Caymanian immigration status or the amount of vehicles owned, etc. And so that's a long answer to say that, yes, Mr. Speaker, the system will be able to identify all persons across both sides, whether you are naturalized Caymanian, or all information, including immigration and general registry.
The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the minister to provide that the other piece of document he was reading from, if it's not a part of this question, maybe it should have been, but also to ask whether the public will have to pay for these IDs or not.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, at this time, I don't think we have made a decision on that one way or the other, sir.
The Honourable the member for Savannah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the minister considering the latter group to be also fingerprinted, as we've talked about in the past, doing some way of recognizing some of these things?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you. Thank the member for the speaker. At this time, I do not believe that we are going to any sort of biometrics, but what each card will have is a chip that will be a unique identifier for every individual.
The Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the minister can tell us, in his substantive answer, he said that that work has started on the register of natural persons. Are we introducing a new category of, from a legal perspective now?
The Leader of the Opposition, you
Mr.
extending
Speaker.
your question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Premier was trying to explain to me off mic there, and I understand one part of what he was saying, but I wonder if the Minister could also say, how long has this process been ongoing?
The Honourable the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there was quite a bit of planning beforehand, but the procurement went out. The procurement process for the system started about a year ago.
The Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad to hear it started a year ago under him, but in my 18 years, it started many years ago. And I understand the difficulties, Mr. Speaker, I do, because the coordination of the registry of births and deaths and immigration is what we have been trying to deal with. I didn't understand the lengthy response to the member from Georgetown. It was kind of convoluted in how we're going to arrive at this stage. But I wonder if the minister can tell us, since he doesn't anticipate this being completed, which is one of the things I've always recommended we coordinate those and have one card. Since he doesn't anticipate this being completed until later on, just before the election, is the government considering any policy statement to avoid the requirement of Caymanians, born Caymanians, having to go over to get a letter of recognition?
The Honorable the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the member for the question. That is certainly a matter for consideration, Mr. Speaker. It's a matter of how the information comes across, so that may just be a logical process that we take to ensure that when you do get registered or that the registration comes across in that way. So it is a matter of compiling all of the information. Again, it is taken from immigration as well as general registry. So I think I'm sure that there will be instances within that where there are some discrepancies and some people may or may not need to be confirmed. But at the end of that process, it is then you have your ID and that's the end of that situation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, maybe the minister may have misunderstood the intent of my question. Maybe I didn't explain it well enough. Currently, every one of us here, 19 of us, 20 maybe, were born in this country. Nevertheless, our children, our offspring, are still required to go to the immigration department and seek a letter of recognition as being Caymanians. What I'm trying to ascertain is when that's going to be stopped first. Number two, if the government in the interim is going to issue a policy statement saying who those people are and what is required, because all of us were registered over by the registry, and a birth certificate should be sufficient to identify me as a Caymanian, because every human being in the world only get issued with one birth certificate, and that's your place of birth and your country of origin. Understood? But with the addition of one of your parents being Caymanians at the time of your birth, 2 birth certificates should be sufficient to identify you as a Caymanian. So I'm trying to determine, especially your mother, I'm trying to determine if government is going to issue a statement in the interim, because this is going to take some time, to say to the people of this country, you are considered Caymanian if you can produce a birth certificate that your mother was a Caymanian at the time of your birth.
Mr. Speaker,
Honourable Minister.
I can appreciate the question from the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. It is, I think that is a question more pointed and perhaps should come as a separate PQ for the Ministry of Home Affairs. And and so I don't fear that within this question I have the ability to provide him with a not even the answer he's looking, but a qualified answer from my ministry.
The member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the minister could give an explanation as to why we're tying this to voter IDs rather than a separate ID, just on the basis that it's going to disenfranchise anyone who is not old enough to vote or drive, if we're relying on driver's license or voter eligibility.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the member for the question. I think it's a reverse. The voter information will be supplemental to the ID. So everyone will get an ID, but you can actually, the voter information will be supplemental to that. So you can use your ID to vote.
Okay, so
the Honourable the member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So just to clarify, then, at birth, a Caymanian can get their national ID. Now, follow-up question, Mr. Speaker. Have we now made changes to government's information systems where we have one central sort of master database that contains everybody's basic information that other systems feed from, or are we still maintaining separate databases that have everybody's information?
The Honourable the Minister.
Thank the member for the question, Mr. Speaker. When I referred to the Register of Natural Persons, that is a process we're going through now, and that will be the official database.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise and stand in order 23-8. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was just inquiring if the government can say when the ministers intend to address the outstanding questions that the clerk of the Assembly has written to them about to give a written answer according to Standing Order 23-8, which says, if you would like me to read, Mr. Speaker, as to their obligations. Standing Orders 23-8 says, any question which has not been received an oral answer by 11 a.m. shall be postponed and placed upon the order paper for reply at some later sitting within that same meeting. Provided that if all other business for the meeting has been disposed of, such postponed questions and all other questions listed on the business paper but not placed on the order paper shall be answered in writing by the member of government whom the question was addressed, and copies of that answer shall be sent immediately there to the clerk, who shall send a copy to the member in whose name the question stood and to all other members. Now, Mr. Speaker, I am aware that the clerk has written to all the ministers, and we've yet to receive the answers. So if the government can give indication as to when they intend to do so.
Mr. Speaker, there was some confusion around this because the member who just spoke had indicated that he wanted the questions carried forward to the next meeting because he wanted his constituents to hear the answers. And I certainly proceeded, and I think all other ministers did as well, on the basis that the appropriate motion had been moved. It was not until we had business committee on Monday that that the clerk clarified that while that discussion may have taken place, no motion was moved. so that ministers are under the obligation to provide the answers in writing, and ministers are in the process of getting that done now.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Premier for clarifying some misunderstanding there and their intention to have those answers provided. But, Mr. Speaker, we're not only talking about questions from the last meeting, we're talking about questions from almost 3 to 4 meetings ago where questions are not answered still. So that does not suffice or give an answer to those other outstanding questions, and I'll be happy to provide for the Premier, if necessary, those questions that are outstanding by each one of the members here in the opposition.
Honorable members, the member from Georgetown Central, are you saying that you have questions beyond the last meeting that have not been answered? The Premier is the leader of government business. Why don't you send him a note on what, or yes? No. I think the Premier has duly explained what happened in this little meeting gone. The motion was not moved. Nobody moved the motion. And so you're saying now beyond that there are others, and you need, and that's what I'm saying, maybe well, you get in contact with the clerk, have her write to the chairman of the business committee so that you can get answers from ministers. I think that seems to be all that is necessary.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, you're 100% correct. But can I just ask one follow-up in respect to this matter? If the Premier is suggesting that they were of the intention that the questions will be carried over, are we suggesting that in the next few days those questions will be on the order paper to be addressed in the same?
No. I don't think the Premier said that. Yeah. And I think we're clear on this, so let's not confuse it further. I think the route is that you get to the clerk, whatever questions you say that you have outstanding, because I don't know them, and then the clerk will take it from there.
Mr. Speaker, I was hesitant to rise again, but I think I have to take this opportunity at this particular point to get your ruling as the presiding officer. But this Standing Order 23.8 says they shall. It does not give a timeline. And I am mindful that the government, if they want to avoid the question, can say, yeah, come in. And that coming could take till the next election. So as the presiding officer, can you give a ruling of time? Does that mean before the next meeting? What is when? When is the time limit? So I can hold them accountable in respect to the
And what standing order are you asking me to give a timeline on?
23.8, Mr. Speaker.
23.8. I don't know what you're asking the presiding officer to do in this instance.
Mr. Speaker, if you allow, if we read the standing orders, it says that they shall provide these answers in writing immediately to the clerk. Now, what is the definition of immediately? As soon as she sent the email? Is it a week time? Is it a month time? When is the end date of that time? So I can know what to expect in respect to them doing their job.
Member for Georgetown Central, I really can't give a timeline on that. I really can't do that. I would think that all being equal, that as soon as you get to her, she will forward to the relevant minister.
When should the answer?
And you want me to, that's what you want me to define? I think we better move on to the next point. I said all things being equal, she will move on. what it means? All things being equal. Honorable member, we are moving on. I am quite satisfied that no member is going to be disadvantaged because it has been aired properly enough. The Premier has agreed that there was a confusion, that you didn't move a motion, they didn't move a motion. I can't move motions like that. And therefore, that part is going to be taken care of. The outstanding questions which you have now identified, we have found a route to deal with it. I don't know what else we can do. Next item.
Statements by honorable ministers and members of the cabinet.
Honorable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to make a statement on the progress of the government in addressing the recommendations of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force contained in its recent report. Mr. Speaker, support for the Cayman Islands financial services industry remains one of the key priorities of this government. The conditions that attracted financial services providers to these shores still underpin our success today. Our adherence to the framework of English common law, our tax-neutral status, and our strong economy and stable and financially robust government. Our financial services industry remains strong and resilient. Like many of our competitors, the Cayman Islands as a jurisdiction has seen the increasing need to upgrade our regime to ensure that we are compliant with the various supranational bodies. Indeed, the view of government, Mr. Speaker, is that as a world-leading financial services center, we have an obligation to ensure that our regulatory regimes are also world-class. And so over the years, the jurisdiction, government, and industry partners have responded to the evolving regulatory landscape and have put in place the necessary regulatory frameworks. Some of these measures have been necessary as Cayman plays its part in the global fight to combat money laundering and to counter the financing of terrorism. Others have been required to enable tax authorities in other countries to access information they need in order to ensure compliance with their own taxation regimes. I do not need to tell this House, Mr. Speaker, how many long hours we have spent in this House as numerous bills have been passed into law. Nor do I need to remind our partners in the industry how many long hours have gone into working up the detail of those bills in such a way as to meet regulatory requirements while still maintaining the space for creativity and innovation that is the hallmark of financial services in this jurisdiction. So it is once again, Mr. Speaker, that we are here at this meeting of the House to consider yet more necessary changes to our legislative framework. Some 11 bills are now before the House, each dealing with some aspect of our anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism regime. Others will speak to the details of those bills, Mr. Speaker, but taken together, they represent a robust response by this government to the recommendations made by the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force in its March 2019 report. As such, they are an important part of our country's efforts to ensure we remain compliant with international standards, and I therefore commend them to the House. Significantly, however, the CFATF's recommendations do not just cover the legislative framework for regulation. For the first time, they have moved on to cover the effectiveness with which the legislation is being implemented. We certainly understand the rationale for ensuring that not only do we as a jurisdiction have the required regulatory framework, but that we also have the mechanisms and people to ensure that the framework is effective and can be proven to be so. And so this government is determined to respond positively to these recommendations, dealing with effectiveness as we are doing in keeping the legislation itself up to date. Doing so requires a response from across government, and partner agencies, including the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. A ministerial subcommittee, which I chair, has been created to oversee the work of the agencies, and we've established a financial crime focus group to ensure coordination and cooperation at the operational level between law enforcement agencies. That group will make recommendations to enhance the quality of work related to the use of financial intelligence and the investigation and prosecution of financial crime. Together, we are working through the detailed action plan that we published at the end of April and which responds to all 63 of the CFATF's recommendations. We have appointed a national coordinator to assist with the coordination between agencies, committees, and all stakeholders involved in the implementation of the action plan. The commitment of the Cayman Islands to this process has also been demonstrated by the funding of additional resources, over 100 new positions for agencies agreed during the March sitting of the Finance Committee. This includes the strengthening of the dedicated anti-money laundering unit at the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority and a dedicated cross-border money laundering and terrorist financing task force within the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, for which an interim team was put in place in April. All told, Mr. Speaker, we will be investing several $1 million more to further strengthen our regulatory regime. And Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that this will not be a one-off expenditure. When you create more than 100 new positions, you have to fund the salaries and other personnel costs and operational costs that go along with that over the long term. We are now monitoring the results of the actions that we have put in place, and we remain committed to taking any further action that may be necessary as we ensure we rise to the challenge that the CFATF has given us. Inevitably, when dealing with effectiveness, it will take time before we are able to fully demonstrate that the measures that we are putting in place are working. However, I expect to be able to demonstrate progress as part of the CFATF enhanced follow-up process when submissions are made on the 24th of September this year in relation to both technical compliance, that is the legislative amendments, and effectiveness. This CFATF report will be presented at the November 2019 CFATF plenary meeting to be held in Antigua. I am sure that members on all sides, Mr. Speaker, will recognize the importance of this work for the future of our islands. Make no mistake, this government will take the action necessary to ensure that our legislation is robust and that it is effectively implemented. I've said previously in this House and elsewhere, Mr. Speaker, that Cayman does not want or need to deal with those who would seek to hide money or use it for illegitimate purposes. Our efforts in improving the effectiveness of the implementation of our world-leading legislation to protect the integrity of our financial services will mean that we can demonstrate to the world that anyone attempting to use Cayman for such illegitimate purposes will be caught and dealt with to the fullest extent possible under the law.
Personal explanations?
None.
Obituary and other ceremonial speeches?
None.
Raising a matter of privilege?
None.
Government business? Bills? First readings? First readings, the Companies Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for a second reading.
The Limited Liability Companies Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
The Limited Liability Partnership Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
The Mutual Funds Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
The Insurance Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
The Building Societies Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
The Cooperative Societies Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
The Banks and Trust Companies Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
The Trust Amendment Number 2 Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
The Money Services Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
The Monetary Authority Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time, set down now for the second reading.
The Auditor's Oversight Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time, is set down for the second reading.
The Public Management and Finance Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
Public Service Pensions Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
The Public Lands Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
Second readings, the Companies Amendment Bill 2019.
The Honourable the Minister of Financial Services.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of a bill entitled the Companies Amendment Bill 2019.
The bill has been duly moved. Is the Minister speaking thereto?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to present the bill on behalf of the government. It is a bill that seeks to amend the Companies Law 2018, which I'll refer to as Companies Law going forward, in order to address key concerns and recommendations raised by the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, CFATF assessors in the Cayman Islands' fourth round mutual evaluation report. Mr. Speaker, before I present the specifics of the bill, please allow me time to provide some background information which is relevant to not only this bill, but also several of the other bills which I will present during the meeting of this House. Mr. Speaker, the bills form a legislative package which aims to address some of the recommendations contained in the March 2019 CFATF fourth round mutual evaluation report of the Cayman Islands. In addition, several of the bills also seek to strengthen the broader regulatory framework for certain financial services activities, and these will be discussed in turn as appropriate. Mr. Speaker, the Mutual Evaluation Report is an assessment of Cayman's anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing, and counter-proliferation financing framework. The assessment evaluated Cayman's technical compliance with the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, 40 recommendations, and also assessed the effectiveness of our AML CFT systems and framework in accordance with the FATF's updated methodology, which now includes an assessment of effectiveness. Mr. Speaker, the FATF has developed a series of recommendations that are recognized as the international standard for combating of money laundering and the financing of terrorism and proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. This is commonly referred to as the 40 recommendations of the FATF. These were first issued in 1990. The FATF recommendations were then revised in 1996, 2001, 2003, and most recently in 2012. Mr. Speaker, according to the FATF website, the following statements have been made. The FATF 40 recommendations are intended to provide a complete set of countermeasures against money laundering, covering the criminal justice system and law enforcement, the financial system and its regulation, and international cooperation. They have been recognized, endorsed, or adopted by many international bodies, and though not a binding international convention, many countries in the world have made political commitments to combat money laundering by implementing the 40 recommendations. Mr. Speaker, as we heard from the Premier in his statement, Cayman is certainly one of those countries that have given the political commitment to do what is necessary to do our part in this regard. Mr. Speaker, the mutual evaluation report identified gaps in both technical compliance, that is the legislation, as well as effectiveness with respect to the implementation of the legislation. The bills that I will present today, Mr. Speaker, seek to address a number of technical compliance recommendations made, which in many cases provide the framework by which greater effectiveness can be demonstrated through implementation of the legislation by the relevant agencies. Mr. Speaker, in discussing the changes necessary to address the recommendations made by the CFATF in its report on the Cayman Islands, I think it is important for us to put all of this in context of what is happening globally. And I say this for the benefit of not just the listeners here in Cayman, but also for the media who may be reporting on these issues throughout the year. It is my understanding that of the countries that have been evaluated using the revised FATF criteria and methodology, which now seeks to also assess effectiveness of AML CFT frameworks, about 80 to 90% of all such countries are under some form of follow-up process. And a large number of those, including, for example, Norway, Hungary, Austria, Belgium, Sweden, and the Isle of Man, as examples, as I said, were either or are under the enhanced follow-up process. So, Mr. Speaker, I say all that to say that Cayman is certainly not alone in its need to address areas for improvement identified with respect to AML CFT legislation and frameworks. Mr. Speaker, the bills to be presented and debated here today were developed in consultation with the Ministry, namely through the Department of Financial Services and the relevant implementing agencies, namely the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority and the Cayman Islands General Registry. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry and members of the Department of Financial Services team work closely with the Anti-Money Laundering Unit to ensure cross-ministerial collaboration. Consultation with the financial services industry took place via the various industry associations. And I have been reliably informed, Mr. Speaker, that input from all stakeholders was duly considered by the Department of Financial Services, and where appropriate, changes were incorporated into the bills before the House today. Mr. Speaker, as a result of the ongoing consultation that took place subsequent to the publication of the Green Bills, committee stage amendments will be presented for a few of the bills at the appropriate time to address some of the comments received during this 21-day consultation period. Mr. Speaker, I hope that this introductory overview was helpful, and in the interest of time, this will serve as the background to the 10 CFATF-related bills which I will present to this Honourable House today. And therefore, I will not repeat this contextual information as each bill is being presented going forward. So now moving specifically to the Companies Amendment Bill 2019. Mr. Speaker, the amendments to the Companies Law 2018 revision contain changes which will address key issues raised in the mutual evaluation report, notably the need to implement measures to ensure that all basic information, including a list of directors, is publicly available for companies. Other changes related to the need to have information more readily available to competent authorities directly from the General Registry, the need to maintain information on the nature of general voting rights in a company's register of members, the need to reduce the time for which companies have to advise the General Registry of changes to directors and officers, and the requirement to make fines for non-compliance with beneficial ownership requirements more dissuasive. Mr. Speaker, the first change in the bill relates to immediate outcome 5 recommended action 1, which goes to effectiveness and which states, quote, the Cayman Islands should conduct a more comprehensive risk assessment to identify, assess, and understand the money laundering and terrorist financing risks and vulnerabilities associated with specific types of legal persons established in the jurisdiction which may be misused for money laundering or terrorist financing purposes, end quote. That is the recommendation that was contained in the report, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, in preparation for the assessment of legal persons, the ministry identified a key issue whereby some competent authorities responsible for AML-CFT supervision were unable to obtain information which was relevant for conducting the risk assessment or for their AML-CFT responsibilities as a whole from the General Registry. The bill, therefore, Mr. Speaker, enables General Registry to provide relevant information directly to competent authorities responsible for AML-CFT supervision within 48 hours for the discharge of their AML-CFT responsibilities. The measure will help improve the timeliness of investigations and the identification of AML-CFT risks of companies incorporated under the company's law. Mr. Speaker, the second change relates to Recommendation 24, Criterion 24.4 of the FATF methodology, which notes, quote, there is no requirement for companies to maintain information in respect of the nature of associated voting rights, end quote. Again, that was the statement made with respect to our MER. Section 40 of the company's law directs a company to maintain a statement of shares held by each member, distinguishing each share by its number and amount paid. Mr. Speaker, the mutual evaluation and report identified this as insufficient, noting that the nature of the voting rights of each category of share should also be maintained in the statement. Recognizing that companies may have very complex voting arrangements, Mr. Speaker, this bill requires a simple confirmation to be added to the statement, indicating whether each relevant category of shares held by the member carries voting rights under the Articles of Association of the company, and if the voting rights are conditional. Mr. Speaker, the intent of the CFATF recommendation is to allow competent authorities inspecting the register of members of a company to identify which members have the ability to control the actions of the company. Though this change is technical in nature, Mr. Speaker, it is required for competent authorities to effectively monitor and supervise entities for AML-CFT purposes. Mr. Speaker, a transitional period has been added to the bill for, that allows registered offices to comply with this requirement, given the new obligation that the bill will impose. Mr. Speaker, Section 55 of the company's law currently directs companies to notify the register within 60 days of any changes of directors and officers. Mr. Speaker, the mutual evaluation report noted under Recommendation 24, Criterion 24.5, that the mechanism to update this information is, quote, not considered to be timely, end quote. And further, jurisdictional comparison conducted by the Department of Financial Services confirms that the 60-day time frame provided in the company's law is outside of what is provided by other jurisdictions. And it is important to note, Mr. Speaker, that the notification timeframe was in fact extended from 30 days to 60 days in 2015 in conjunction with the introduction of more stringent penalties for breaches of the notification requirement. However, this notification period extension in fact brought the Cayman Islands out of line with other comparable jurisdictions and no doubt led to the notification of such in our MER. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, we note that Guernsey, Ireland, Hong Kong, and the UK impose a notification period of less than 15 days, and the Isle of Man, Jersey, and Singapore impose notification periods between 15 and 30 days. So, Mr. Speaker, the third change of this bill therefore amends Section 55 of the Companies Law to shorten and thus revert the notification period to 30 days to better align the notification period with that of the FATF accepted standards. Mr. Speaker, the fourth change in the bill relates to Immediate Outcome 5, Recommendation 3 of the Mutual Evaluation Report, which states that the jurisdiction should, quote, implement measures to ensure that all basic information, including information on the directors of exempted companies and LLCs respectively, is publicly available, end quote. Mr. Speaker, basic information is outlined in the FATF methodology under Recommendation 24 to include the company name, proof of incorporation, legal form and status, address of registered office, basic regulating powers, and a list of directors. The recommendation further specifies that this information should be publicly available. Mr. Speaker, the Companies Law does not currently provide for a list of directors to be made publicly available. We note that some of our competitors, including Jersey, Guernsey, Luxembourg, Hong Kong, Bahamas, Ireland, and Bermuda, all have made a list of directors available to the public. The Mutual Evaluation Report identified this as a major gap in our AML-CFT framework, quote, considering the number of companies incorporated in our jurisdiction, end quote. So, Mr. Speaker, because of the importance of this requirement for our next CFATF review and the potential impact to financial services industry, careful consideration was given to the information which should be included in the list of directors. Mr. Speaker, the bill proposes that the list contain only the names of the current directors of the company as well as the current alternate directors, if applicable.
Honourable Minister, is this a good time to take the break? Or you think you will finish very quickly?
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to take the break at this time and we can reconvene.
Honourable members, we will take the break at this time and we will resume at 2:30.